Invincible is setting up the end. The end of Viltrum's reign over the galaxy, the end of Cecil's authority over the Guardians of the Globe, and the end of Mark and Amber's relationship. Invincible Season 2 continues with Episode 6, It's Not That Simple, a title that I disagree with, as throughout the episode, all I could scream at the TV was, "Break up already!" Yeah, it's clear Mark and Amber's relationship is on its last legs, and those legs are walking with a limp. But their relationship isn't the only thing falling apart, as the Guardians are struggling with tragedy. The Viltrumites are practically trying to force a second chance onto Omni-Man. Cecil continues to lose control over everyone. And William's boyfriend Rick returns to remind us that normal, everyday people aren't equipped to deal with the life-changing insanity the superhero world ropes them into. Lots of angst to talk about in this episode, so let's waste no time and get emo. The episode picks up in the aftermath of Rex, Streaking Ray, and Duplikate versus the Lizard League, where Ray and Kate got absolutely slaughtered before Rex's very own eyes. King Lizard shows up and pulls a gun right to the back of Rex's head, and in classic Invincible fashion, instead of cutting the tension with a fake out where the music swells but someone comes in to save Rex at the last second, King Lizard straight up pulls the trigger and blows Rex's brains out. I was stunned. Like, did this show really just kill off 3 Guardians while the rest are fighting for their lives in space? Thankfully, the answer is no. As against all odds, Rex gets up on his feet and beats King Lizard seemingly to death one-handed. Man, not even one-handed. He's beating his ass with his bone. A sharp reminder that this man has super strength. Just sheer unadulterated rage as he wants this Cobra reject to shut the hell up. I don't think this rage stems solely from the Lizard League decimating the team either. I think more than anything, Rex was pissed at himself in this moment. It's clear this is a major turning point in his arc. He was ill-prepared for a situation like this, despite propping himself up as the highest-ranking Guardian on Earth after the rest of the team left. The fact they were able to take down the Lizard League at all shows that with the right precautions, they could have handled the situation without being down 2 teammates. But his arrogance led them to underestimating their opponents and running into the battle without much of a plan beyond the initial ambush. Because as Kate said, they thought these guys were supposed to suck. Throughout the battle, Rex was devastated and distressed as he was humbled in the most horrific way possible, getting a major reality check that they can't just wing these situations. So when King Douche is still monologuing after all the blood that's been spilled, Rex was probably baffled that he let things get this bad to where this Team Rocket motherfucker is having the last laugh. And he just lets all of his frustrations explode into one of the most raw beatings we've seen in the series so far. He didn't even process that he was shot in the head until the GDA arrived on the scene, collapsing shortly after. Also, hey, Ray survived. Woo! Yeah. She's hot. I suppose she just shrank down enough to avoid being fully digested, bursting out a Komodo dragon's throat shortly after Rex is KO'd. Yeah, maybe it's an ass pull, but stranger things have happened in this show, let's be real. So I guess only Kate died. But hey, if it turns out she did miraculously pull through, this would have been one huge close call. I'm not even mad that they faked this out with Ray, because it solidifies that above everything, this was a much needed humbling for Rex and the rest of the team. He was traumatized beyond belief, and aside from learning to never underestimate his opponents again, he later tells Mark in the hospital that this near-death experience caused his life to flash before his eyes, and he didn't like what he saw at all. He realized he treated every girl in his life horribly for no real reason. None of them deserved it. And yeah, we were there for season 1, bro. You were definitely a fuckboy. But there's no denying that he's earned redemption by this point. And although his sins are nowhere near on the level of Omni-Man's, I can't help but notice that the series has been putting them both through the gauntlet of confronting the people they hurt, witnessing their loved ones being put in danger because of their actions, and getting their own asses handed to them in order to realize, I might be a dick. It's not one-to-one, as obviously Omni-Man is going through his redemption arc, which is going to be a much slower burn than Rex's. But I still think this pattern can be the show's template when it comes to redemption arc, crushing someone's ego, their sense of self, and leaving them with nothing but introspection, self-reflection for their actions. But while Rex was getting his licks in on King Lizard, the other Guardians were wrapping up their battle against the Sequids. And while Rudy got some time to shine, as he whipped up a way to neutralize the threat at hand, these These moments were really a way to explore Mark's growth as a hero and warrior after Nolan forced him to tap into his strength on Thraxa. Mark has always been afraid of his own strength, but after seeing what he's up against and having to tap into that strength to survive a handful of Viltrumites, he's learning to be comfortable with using his strength as a shield to protect his loved ones instead of fearing it'll hurt them. It's also enabling Mark to be way more confident in himself, learning when to draw the line, to stand up for himself and take leadership, something we caught a glimpse of in the last episode when he refused to hand over his brother to Cecil and is on full display here as he manages to be assertive to Immortal during the crisis, affirming that he's stronger and faster than him, so he'll be the one to take out the Sequids. And while I don't think Cecil or Immortal lack trust in Mark, quite the opposite actually, a part of me can't help but wonder if they're quick to comply because deep down, they're scared of Mark. They saw the kind of death and utter destruction Omni-Man can cause on a whim. Hell, Immortal felt it twice! And with Mark now coming to terms with what he's capable of, they'd rather stay on his good side so long as he's fighting for humanity's future, instead of running the risk of getting on his bad side. Not that they think Mark's a loose cannon ready to pop off at a moment's notice, but more so they know to pick their battles wisely. No need to challenge the most valuable asset Earth has right now. Mark's confidence as a hero is further highlighted by how he handles the Martians after the fact. They want to punish Chase Smith's actions with death, yet Mark decides to hightail it out of there and give this nervous wreck another chance, clearing out the pursuing fleet with finesse, tearing their vehicles to shreds without killing a single Martian. If this was season 1, he'd be hesitant, he'd be panicking, but here, he's confident, he's decisive, and he's in control. Because that's what it means to be invincible, saving the day while sparing lives in the process, sticking to your moral code no matter how tough the situation gets. Mark Grayson would never take a life. Never, ever, ever. Ever. Also, Rudy offers to help Monster Girl adapt to the unfortunate circumstances of her powers, whipping up some kind of invention that could aid her on the battlefield, but she declines, not wanting to feel forced into it by the guy she went on one date with. She wants it to be her own decision. That being said, she's definitely gonna fold and accept his help at some point, lest she trades being a guardian of the globe to join the cast of Boss Baby instead.
That's amazing!
Sheesh. They're aggressively setting up this relationship. At least let them break up with Amber first. And speaking of which, please, just break up. I'm begging you. No one's having fun in this relationship. I get the show wants to depict a realistic teenage, young adult relationship, right down to staying together way longer than they should. But we shouldn't be forced to witness this train wreck any longer. Please, I'm getting flashbacks. You can spend your time on other things. A major chunk of this episode is spent facilitating the end of Mark and Amber's relationship. It's pretty obvious that this is the end of the road for them, as neither of them are happy, and the relationship is actively taking a toll on the both of them. Amber breaks down when she hears what happened to Rex, Kate, and Ray. An extremely valid reaction to have. It just also highlights how incompatible she is with the superhero world. Because at this point, that was just another Thursday at the office for them. Make no mistake, what happened was absolutely horrifying. But whereas Amber now has to be worried if something like that could happen to Mark, Mark's just grateful Rex and Ray pulled through. He knows he can't afford to dwell on it. It's just one example of the huge emotional disconnect between the two. They go out for a coffee date that's mad awkward, describing it themselves as a bad first date. They've grown distant. They lay it all out on the table, yet they won't rip off the Band-Aid. Again, I definitely say it's realistic, but who's watching these scenes going, now that's top tier television? No one! Everyone is over this. Even the characters know that this relationship is donezo. Highlighted when Eve checks in on Rex. This show can't help but to lean heavy into Mark and Eve being endgame.
He and Amber are...
Body's still warm, guys. In their feelings and needing someone to talk to, Mark goes to good old Uncle Art for relationship advice, while Amber turns to Eve. A conversation that kind of feels like the show is trying to get Amber haters to level with her a bit, elaborating on her perspective one last time and recontextualizing a bit of it through the eyes of Eve. While Mark opens up about his own guilt. A huge point of contention between Amber and fans of Invincible during season 1 was Amber being upset at Mark for not coming clean over his secret identity, not telling him that she figured out he was invincible, evidently playing dumb herself, and people weren't digging the idea that she was upset at him for saving the world instead of spending time with her. All of these things get directly addressed in these two conversations. Mark hiding his identity and lying to Amber about it is equated to all of the times Rex cheated on Eve and lied about it once she started catching on. Now, it's not about the intentions of Rex or Mark's actions, as Rex was clearly in the wrong, while Mark was obviously worried about letting Amber into this world. It's more about the mutual feeling Eve and Amber shared, knowing they're being lied to by their partner, who's not only denying the reality of the situation, but is insisting something else is going on entirely. No one likes being on the receiving end of that situation. It's going to make you feel crazy, which is frustrating because you know you're not. That's definitely going to create a lack of trust in the relationship. Now, I'm gonna be real. I think most people who were annoyed by Amber in season 1 aren't going to be swayed by this conversation, as they took issue with how all this was executed more than anything. Again, I don't hate Amber, but I think her behavior in season 1 was supposed to be that of a flawed teenager who has valid feelings but doesn't convey them all too well. They're both messy teens who desperately want to make things work, even though they know it's probably not gonna pan out because they're from 2 different worlds. But again, that might not be fun to watch. And I can see for how a lot of people that just sucks the momentum out of the show. Can't say I was ever frothing at the mouth for more Mark and Amber content. And here, they make it a point to show that Amber does feel guilty about wanting to spend time with Mark, that she understands he has to drop everything when duty calls, and that the fact it can upset her makes her feel like a jerk. Conversely, Mark understands what Amber's going through because it reminds him of him and his dad. How Nolan had to constantly be out of the house because he was saving the world, which Mark and Debbie didn't want to complain about because it's saving the world, man! Of course it feels like nothing else could compare, so they buried their emotions. And he hates feeling like he's doing that to Amber, that he's putting her in that position, because he knows how complex and shitty it is. I personally really like this scene, although I'm exhausted by the relationship. I like that they took a moment to spell out what they were going for here, because this relationship was clearly their attempt at deconstructing the trope of superheroes hiding their identities from their loved ones, and how it would realistically foster toxic relationships like this one, even when both parties involved mean well. When it's built on a dishonest foundation, it's destined to fail. And while they did kind of spill it out for everyone, I'd also argue that's realistic. Sometimes you have to talk to a friend and see things for what they are in order to realize that it might be time to bail. And I like that Amber went to a mutual friend while Mark went to someone who's kind of unbiased, doesn't really know Amber, but has plenty of dating experience. You can tell that this relationship was coming from an honest place. Clearly, a lot of people stand on business and say they didn't know the execution of this, and if that's how you feel, that's fine. But I appreciate that the show at least tried to clean it up a little by the end of the relationship. Too bad they're gonna drag out this breakup for at least another episode. And to further highlight how the superhero world can really mess someone up, we have the return of William's boyfriend, Rick. You know, the dude who Ezra Miller turned into one of those cyborg zombies last season? Yeah, he's back. He came back before Hellboy. I'm kinda shocked. And like Donald, Rick's been reconstructed back into a human, at least on the outside. Donald is actually helping ease Rick in, which leads to him spilling his guts out through a powerful monologue about the trauma of having your body put back together, and how that can resurface depending on factors like returning to an environment of an inciting incident. Rick is clearly haunted by what went down and what Sinclair did to him, feeling like there's parts of himself missing, and suffering from survivor's guilt after learning he's a sole survivor.
You're the only one who, recovered.
D.A. Sinclair took so much of me away. Who am I if I can't even remember what I'm missing?
It reminds me of how shaken up Amber was just hearing about the Guardians, while Mark kept composure through the whole thing. These ordinary people aren't built for the batshit insanity the heroes have to grapple with on a daily basis. And you can see that what Rick's going through is impacting William, who up to this point was just kinda rolling with the punches and witnessing Mark's adventures secondhand. The consequences never seem to affect him personally, beyond Mark not being around as much lately. What Rick's going through seems to be the first time that William is getting affected by the chaotic nature of the world they're living in. And although Sinclair was interested in roboticizing Rick regardless, I wonder if William will end up taking out his frustrations on Mark or even Cecil down the road. Keep in mind, Cecil kept Sinclair around to make a whole army of these cyborgs. Once word of that gets back to William and Rick, you bet your ass William is going to raise hell. And if Mark for whatever reason tries to defend Cecil, their friendship is going to be beyond strain. Oh wait, Eric Baza voices this guy now. Does the reference still work?
Even when it killed her, over and over and over again.
Was this dude trying to be funny, or am I just an awful person? This episode also gave Immortal some sorely needed and on-point development as he mourns the loss of Duplikate. And although he tear me in half if he heard me say this, if you ask me, I'm kinda seeing Omni-Man parallels. Immortal is confused on why Kate's death is messing him up so bad. She wasn't the first lover in his long life, yet their love was certainly the deepest. Like Kate herself said, Immortal's the only other person who's died as much as she has. They share a unique and frankly horrifying experience that no one else can understand. He never felt this attached to a partner before, and it's amplifying grief that he didn't even know could exist. It reminds me of how Nolan so desperately wanted to avoid his attachments to Earth, how he rationalized Debbie as a pet and not a wife, and how he tried to convince Mark that there was no use in fighting for the people he was going to outlive. Or how Nolan was on the verge of tears over the Thraxans who got caught in the crossfire between him and the other Viltrumites. Immortal contrasts Omni-Man in so many ways, yet the biggest thing they share in common are the complex emotions and existential crises that accompany their long lifespans. And they both would rather resort to violence and unleash their complicated emotions through blind rage than unpacking those feelings and what it means for them. That they're not immune to fulfilling relationships and the whirlwind of emotions that accompany them just because they live longer. That the time they spend with these people does matter. And it was great seeing Immortal get humbled by Allen, not with an ass kicking, but just by having the dude make him realize that he is in fact Wilden. Hopefully that gave him the reality check he needed, and the rest of the season will put him on the path to recovery. I mean, there's only 2 episodes left, but you know what I mean. Something else I want to touch on real quick is the episode continuing the trend of Cecil losing his intimidation factor, as his grip over everyone has loosened quite a bit. We saw this last episode with Mark, but they really crank it up a notch in this one. Cecil tries to entice Debbie to hand over Olive to the government, but she refuses. The nanny sent by Cecil is pretty transparent that, despite Cecil sending her as a sort of power play, Debbie has control in the situation. And I think Debbie complied just because she knows she has to return to work sooner than later, and the quicker she can find some sort of stability, the better. Cecil begs Eve to come back to the team, but he doesn't really have any ammunition. He tries to send Immortal on a mandatory vacation, and not only does good old Abe refuse, but he flies into space in a blind rage when he thinks he caught a whiff of Omni-Man. Coupled with the return of Rick reminding us that St. Clair is still lurking around, I truly wouldn't be surprised if Cecil's breaking point is transforming the Guardians into a backup plan and using the mind-controlled cyborg zombies to carry out his orders without any resistance after being shut down by everyone around him so many times. Just seems like the right escalation for the series. Don't tell me if that happens in the comics though. Who am I kidding? Someone down in the comments already has it typed out. Now, I already broke down my thoughts on Debbie raising Oliver in the last episode, and this episode kind of just reaffirms everything I said there. She feels connected to this child. He's family. And she raised Mark, who's turning out pretty alright, so she knows she can do this. Also, Oliver keeps calling Debbie Mama, which makes me feel terrible for Undressa. Her kid already forgot about her, which is pretty devastating. Rounding out this episode, we have what feels like some Season 3 setup with the impending Viltrumite War. Allen wants to bring Mark to Thadeus to discuss their plan to turn the tides, but Mark's putting his foot down about going back to space so soon. I find it so funny that Nolan made bank off of just basing his novels on real-life experiences, especially on the planet he was planning to enslave. Like, bro, you gave the masses everything they needed to know. I mean, judging by other universes, it wouldn't have really helped, but it's still funny to think about. Suffice to say, I imagine the real-life counterparts to the contents of these novels, like Space Rider, will play a major role in Season 3. Nolan isn't doing too hot either as he prepares for execution. Ironically, Craig offers Nolan a chance to rejoin Viltrum instead of facing certain death. He says Earth turned Nolan into a weak, sentimental traitor, yet it's clear they don't want to kill the guy. Almost as if there could be a sentimental reason for that? Like they admire Nolan and almost have an attachment to him? I don't know. But of course, Nolan just stays silent and refuses to fold. Honestly, could have used more scenes like this in the episode instead of dragging out Mark and Amber's relationship, but that is what it is. So much is going on in the show, and the season is coming to a head. Not only did Chase Smith puke out a Sequid who immediately seizes control of his body, but Angstrom Levi has returned to his home dimension in a fresh fit, ready to exact his revenge on Invincible. Again, the season's almost done, huh? 8 episodes just doesn't cut it, Chief. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours. Drop them in the comments below, and subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss an Invincible video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.